Okay, we're live. I'd like to welcome everyone to Financial Planning in the Midst of a Crisis. We are happy that you're here. I want to introduce our two speakers this evening. Connor, if we could put their contact information up so everyone can see it. First, I'd like to introduce Scott Cole. He's a certified financial planner. He's been quoted in the Wall Street Journal, Money Magazine, U.S. News and World Report, in abcnews.com. He's also an adjunct professor at the University of Alabama. Damien J. Carson is a staff member at a global nonprofit. He's an expert on consumer education. He's a sought-after public speaker. He's the host of Our Money Matters on Facebook, and he's the co-chair of the Small Business Council in Birmingham and a member of Leadership Birmingham. And I just want to go over just a slight disclaimer before we start. This is not investment advice. It is for entertainment purposes only. If a particular stock or bond or anything is mentioned, we are not endorsing the selling or buying of that security. We're just using it as an example. So I'd like to thank both of you for being here and sharing with the audience. I've known Scott since we were 16, I believe, and I took his starting position on the high school basketball team. And I've known Damien about 10 years, and I would like to say that I do not take advantage of our friendship and ask them financial advice, or not financial, I ask them about particular things, but I do all the time. And I would just thought this would be a great way to, give other people opportunity to sort of ask questions about things they're interested in. But really tonight we're talking about financial planning in a time of crisis. And with everything going on in the world today, especially COVID, people have a lot of questions about that. And so and if you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them or ask them in the comment section, and we'll get them to Scott or Damien. The first question I'll start off is, what are the 4 steps to turn a crisis into a new start?
Damien, you want to take it?
You know what? I was going to defer, and I know that we're not talking sports today, and I just want to welcome everybody for tuning in with us. I was going to say, since Alabama did beat the Dogs, that I was going to defer to you to go first. I'm a good sport.
Well, you are that. You are a gracious loser. I mean, a good sport about it. Bryce, the pandemics are, obviously this is, something that none of us have gone through before. But if you just kind of said this is a kind of a crisis, it is a crisis for a lot of people. A lot of people are really struggling. And the key is that every crisis is an opportunity. And what you want to try to do is you want to figure out, how can I learn from this, particularly in the context of what we're talking about here today? We're talking about finances. Are there things that I can learn through this crisis that will allow me maybe to come out of this crisis in a better situation? And more importantly, prepare yourself for the next unforeseen event. It may not be a pandemic, but there's going to be things in life that happen that are unexpected. And what you have to do is you've got to be able to kind of step away from the kind of the financial edge that so many people live on. And if you can do that, then you are setting yourself up for better success, and hopefully not only stepping away from the crisis, but actually building wealth and putting yourself in a better situation. So, Damon and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and the first thing you got to do is you got to recover, and then you've got to learn to live. You got to live within the crises, and you've got to learn to be generous. I think we're going to talk about giving in the midst of a pandemic, because that's really counterintuitive. And so it's very difficult to kind of think about how generosity can actually help build wealth. But I think I know Damien feels the same way, that generous living is the way way to live. And then you need to start building. So you kind of recover and live. You got to learn to give, and then you got to start to build. And that's kind of the framework that we were thinking about, and on how to do that. And then, and we'll kind of talk about each of these as we go. But those are the four things that I think of. Every crisis is an opportunity. You have an orientation that you kind of had coming into this crisis, and crises kind of disorient you, and it kind of throws everything out of whack. All the little plans that you had, all the little hopes you had, all those types of things, they get kind of messed up in that crisis. The key is, do you reorient yourself to something new? And that is by recovering and building and living and giving, or do you just kind of revert back to those old habits, which means the next crisis is going to knock the legs out from under you, and you're going to be right back where you were.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what Scott and I talked about, to try to create 4 buckets, just to try to give it some context. And then we'll go through and try to unpack those 4 buckets, because when most people are living in a crisis, and like Scott referenced, living on edge, oftentimes the thought process of being able to step away from the edge or move from the edge, on top of all the noise that's just going on out there, on top of being in a financial crisis, it's like, what do I need to do? And part of that recovery part or piece that we talked about is you want to assess where you are. Unfortunately, some people may not realize that they're at the tip of that edge, and if wind blows, right, depending on where you are, it can take you over the edge. And oftentimes, one of the things we talked about, and some people call it a budget. I know I don't like that term, and Scott doesn't either. But from a very, very practical standpoint, is being able to assess and see what's my spending habits, and where's the money or the resources that's coming in, where are those dollars going at the end of the day? Because if you continue to spend as if money was coming in on a normal basis, then you're going to really find yourself in a crisis. And it's going to be dependent upon when and how long it's going to take you to make that turnaround that we want to talk about. So in what we share today is for us to be better prepared, to be proactive, right? Because the damage that COVID is brought to so many people financially has pretty much taken place. Although I think there's some things that you can do to minimize that crisis, or minimize some of the consequences that come with living in a crisis.
Yeah. So you got to, if I'm hearing what you're saying, and I agree, you kind of got to have to assess where you're at, and look, we're in it now. You may have lost your job. You may have, lost your income, and you're really scrounging around to figure out what you're going to do. But you need to, again, take the opportunity. You may have a little bit more time on your hands to kind of sit down and figure out, this is what's really happening with my finances. When financial planning really is about assessing, it is assessing where you're at. This is, the technical terms we talk about, net worth and balance sheets and all of that kind of stuff. All those are snapshots of a current or present situation. So if you were to do a net worth statement, and for those people that are maybe not familiar with that, because we don't want to get bogged down in financial jargon. Net worth is just taking everything that you own, putting a value to it, subtracting everything that you owe to other people, and that is quote unquote your net worth. That's not your worth, by the way. That's just a financial designation that says this is kind of where I am at right now. I think a good place, Damien, I don't know if you agree or not, a good place to start is just to kind of look at it. One of the things we talked about, you and I don't like the term budget. I don't like budgets because they're just like diets. Nobody wants to be on one. Nobody enjoys being. I know you and I don't like being on diets, and I got a feeling that a lot of the people watching this don't really want to do it. You don't stick to it. It's not sustainable. It does have a purpose, and it can be a corrective measure, but it's not something that most people will stick to. So you have to have a spending plan. But take this time and just say, so the thing about diets, right, is if I'm going to, if I wanted to go on a weight loss program, and I need to have a goal, right? How much do I want to lose? How do I know how long do I need to stay on this diet? Well, I got to know where I'm at right now so that I know when I can get off this blasted diet. So I've got to know, I got to look. It's hard truths. I got to step on the scale. I got to look down, and I got to say, oh, that's not what I thought it was. Or maybe that's, maybe better than I thought, or it may be worse. But at the very least, you have to know where you're at. And so kind of calculating, assessing your spot in the finances is just looking at it, however messy it is, and then recognizing, okay, if this is where I'm at, and then you define where you want to go, then financial planning is just about, putting all the little action steps that get you from point A, present, to point B, future. Is that how you see it?
That's how I see it. And as the next step as we stay in this recovery bucket is part of that spending plan is assessing your current needs versus your current wants. Right. And so in my time in working with individuals, that's one of the things that we have to look in the mirror and be transparent with ourselves, because things that happened when things were like pre-COVID and say finances was coming in, maybe you was able to get overtime. If that stopped, or unfortunately, if you had to, was laid off and now you're drawing unemployment, for some folks, that's way less. For some people, they did, have leveled up, if you will. And so an example of that, as we talk about being practical on assessing the needs and the wants, is you can't be concerned about, what Scott is doing, for example, what Bryce is doing. You have to look and see what's going on within your household there. And oftentimes I talk to folks and I tell them, look, my wife and I turned the cable off, Scott. Right. Because what our goal was to try, and it's part of the recovery and assessing, to determine, okay, do I really need to spend that kind of money on cable? And I know some people may, laugh or do whatever, and that's totally fine. But that was a decision that we made to get us further away from that tip, as we talked about it when we first started, or that edge. So if something did happen, I could be in better position to pivot and make adjustments versus just going on thinking, oh, I got to have, cable. I got to have, some of the other things that we've come accustomed to, perhaps, to thinking that it's a need, when at the end of the day, it's a want. And the sooner we can determine the difference in the two, the quicker we can get on our road to recovery.
Yeah, no doubt. And so when we talk about, one of the things that financial people talk about all the time is the need for an emergency fund or a rainy day fund or something like that. And I talk about it. I mean, I'm a big believer in it. We'll talk about it more down in a little bit, I think. But the typical thing that you hear financial people say is you need to have 3 to 6 months of living expense set aside in cash, right? That's considered a fully funded emergency fund. Well, heavens, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of cash, particularly when you may be barely scraping by. You lost your job, or you, at the very least, you lost a lot of hours or some types of, and then to think about, how am I supposed to have that kind of thing? Well, when you say 3 to 6 months, what we are talking about is not 3 to 6 months of everything that you've got going on at any given time. We're talking about 3 to 6 months of what you just said, the basic needs. You don't need 3 to 6 months of cable expenses built into that, but you do need to be able to pay your rent, right, or your mortgage, because you don't want to get kicked out. So you want to try to work toward having that kind of cash available. You got to have some electricity. You got to put some food on the table. Now, there's a lot of places you can trim there, but you got to have enough money to put some food on the table. And then if you have some, insurance premiums, you probably need enough to cover those things. Those are essential, basic needs that you need to cover. Everything else is fluff. Depending on how severe the crises, will determine how much of the wants you have to shred. Some of the wants frankly, you don't even miss. You cut something out and you didn't, it was just one of those things. We're in a kind of I'm getting off my talking points here. I'm just going to tell you, D, here we go. But, one of the things we got in our society is, we're kind of a subscription type of world now, right? We subscribe to Disney Plus and to Netflix and to ESPN Plus and to everything's, it's easy. It's just automated. You Xbox Live thing is, Office 365. All that stuff is just it just recurs, and we put it on there, and we don't ever forget about it. A lot of that stuff that is just not essential. So, in crises, you may need to go back and reassess that again, kind of knowing where you're at, looking at what is the real, the reality of the situation that you're in, and just be very honest. I'm not really big on living your life in a lot of guilt. Okay, so you don't need to do that as an exercise of beating yourself up. What's done is done. If you make some money mistakes in the past, every one of us here has. You don't need to beat yourself up about it. You just need to say, from here on, I'm going to make some changes. I'm not gonna, I'm going to be more intentional about the where I spend my money. One of the things that we recognize that is a real problem and pushes people closer and closer to that financial edge is debt. It's amazing what people, they're paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month on stuff they can't even remember what it was for to begin with, because they got some kind of credit card debt, for instance. There's good debt and there's bad debt. That may be another topic, but you got to be able to trim that stuff back. And if you're in a crisis, you find out, okay, I've got to, if I can eliminate this debt, I free up 100, 200, maybe several $100s a month in free cash flow. And all you've done is just get rid of the debt that got you into this problem to begin with. Getting rid of debt is a big step back from the financial cliff that we were talking about, in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt. And part of it, as we talk about it, it's a process. And it's one of those things where we just have to trust the process, because some of the things that you were mentioning, Scott, all I kept hearing was automation. And a lot of times that's what we've come accustomed to, that until you stop to determine, okay, how I'm going to recover, you may not realize you have Netflix being deducted out of your checking or your savings account. You may not know that gym membership that you hadn't been to probably in some time is still being coming out of your checking, and maybe some other things that's been on autopilot. So one of the things that we wanted to make clear is the steps that we talk about. We hopefully to become a lifestyle, regardless if we live in a crisis situation or a pandemic, that you'll continue to do on a regular basis. And so, Bryce, I don't know if you have another question, just to pass it to you a little bit. I didn't forget about you. But before I do, I did want to say this, that when we talk about the recovery, and then what Scott mentioned, living, giving, and then also building, I want us to think about it in the way of percentages. And I'll be the quick first one to say that I didn't graduate cum laude or magna laude. I graduated thank you laude. And with that being said, when we look at it from a percentage standpoint, regardless if you have $500 or $5,000, if you can get into the habit of saving 10%, right? Giving 10%, perhaps, from some of us who believe in tithing, if you will, and maybe sometimes more than that. But understanding what that is, so you'll get accustomed to doing it from a percentage standpoint, not so much from a dollar amount standpoint. And you just have to be okay with that, because this crisis is not going to last a long time for many of us if we do what we talk about on tonight's call to help get us again further away from the edge, so we can be a little bit more comfortable and can pivot to address that next pandemic that may come our way.
I just want to give a plug real quick since we're talking about Netflix and subscription services. The library has Hoopla that works just like Netflix. We also check out Roku's, and we have, of course, books, hard copies, and electronic books or ebooks. So if people are looking to supplement, if they cut the cord, they can actually get streaming services through the library. Something that we had discussed and we sort of touched on in the second bucket as far as live is spend according to your values. If someone wants to touch upon that, I mean, I know we did a little bit, but just further explore that piece of it.
Right.
Yeah. So, I kind of get a little perturbed when, it's important to cut unnecessary expenses in crisis. All right. I want to be on the record as saying that, but I get a little perturbed with some of my friends and my colleagues when they sit there and they nitpick at things that don't really move the needle much. For instance, a real kind of common trope that you'll hear is, the latte factor. They'll poke fun at people that go and buy a latte every day. Now, look, lattes that's $5, I think, something like that. I mean, it's not an inexpensive thing necessarily if you're buying 2 a day. That's $50 a week. But what you hear a lot of people say is, what happened if you would just cut out the coffee that you get every day and invest that? Well, first off, nobody's doing that. All right. Nobody is taking, driving past the Starbucks or the coffee house and saying, I was going to spend $4.50 there. And I'm going to take that $4.50 out of my pocket right now. And when I'm going to get to the office and transfer it over to my brokerage account. Nobody does that. So let's just stop saying it. Okay. You need, and I would say even in a crisis, it's even more important to find those little bitty micro joys in life that bring you a little peace. If you like to drink coffee or a latte, that's fine. Whatever it is, you don't need to feel shamed about spending a little bit on yourself. Damien, you may disagree, but I just believe that you've got to live a little. Yes, you got to button down the hatches. For instance, you got to get real. You got to assess yourself, but you don't need to feel guilty. You don't need to cut every little thing out that brings you pleasure or joy. So, if Netflix is important to you, that's fine. Now that you can get a Roku from the library, that's even better. I listen to I don't know, probably 12 books a year that I check out from the library. I don't buy any audiobooks. I always go in there and I'm looking for the next book that I can listen to on my walk or something like that. It's a great service. But so there are substitutes that you can find, and that's great. But you don't need to feel ashamed of finding a little relief. We can't just sit in our quarantined room and never do anything. We have to live something. So I don't think the way to financial success is to sit there and cut every piece of pleasure out of your spending plan.
Right.
Damon, you agree? Or
I agree. I agree with it. And, part of that spending per values is really, when you take that assessment and the things that you value, when you think about from the standpoint of not even if it's important, but I'm going to go a little deeper, if you will, and talk about how critical and urgent it is. And you touched on it earlier when we talked about having rent and mortgage. So if I'm in a financial crisis right now and I know my income is being cut, then the one thing that I'm going to make sure that I have is my rent and mortgage payment or mortgage. Then I'm also going to make sure I got some food on the table. right? And so going back to the values, you may have to, cut down on what that looks like, right? And not eat out as much. But anything else that's part of that spending plan that's not related to that. And if you have a car payment, I want to pay my car payment and possibly cell phone, if you will. But everything else is a non-negotiable. And that's the discipline that you have to also be mindful that's only going to be temporary, right? That it's not like, ooh, I would never be able to do some of the things that I once did, right? If I make some adjustments right now. And, as you do that, you'll find some extra income, if you will, to be able to do the things that you ultimately need to do. And so I wanted to make sure to share that information there around the spending plan. And the other thing that I want to tell the folks, especially if you're out there, because, we had close to 1 million folks file for unemployment again last week. I think over 50-something million people have filed for unemployment. That is okay. That if you can't do some of the things that you used to do, I remember growing up with my mom and, on hard times that, we had to be creative to find the fun that some of my friends in school used to do. And I'm telling you, the kid's going to be okay if you find yourself in that situation to go check out a CD or something at the library. I do it, right? So we talk about a lifestyle because that frees up other income that allows me to do some other things that I may want to do. And so I want to share that with that individual that's out there that it is okay, that it is okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to pop this thing up because we talked about it a little bit earlier.
Mhm.
When you get there's a lot of stuff in the world to kind of get anxious about, right? We don't know what's going on with the elections. We don't know if our kids are going to be in school or be in virtual school. We don't know if we're going to have a job, if we're not going to have a job. There's all kinds of hand wringing that we can do, but there's a lot of that stuff that we don't have any control over. And what you need to do in a crisis is you need to be able to focus on the things that you can control and that matter. So it's not all the same. So there are some things that you can control but don't really have a whole lot of influence. There are some things and there's a lot of things that you have that matter, but you don't have any say over. But we spend all of our time, or a lot of our time, worrying, getting anxious, getting angry, posting things on social media about things that matter, but we don't have any control over. And we're missing an opportunity. The opportunity in this time is to find that little middle ground where those two circles intersect, if you will, where you have the opportunity to take the things that you can do, your spending. You can control your spending. And that does matter. But sitting there and worrying about a lot of the things that you can control but don't matter, that's wasted energy. So if you want to kind of come through a pandemic, then you have to learn to find the place where the things that matter and the things that you can control kind of overlap, and then laser focus your energy on those types of things. And if buying a latte gets you through this, then go buy the latte. But you might find that you don't need 5 of them a week. You just need 1 of them a week. Everybody's going to be different. Spend according to on the things that are essential, and then you'll find that there's a lot of life that doesn't require a subscription fee. There's a lot of things going on in life that doesn't require you to pay another monthly assessment. So find those things that really matter to you, that are important, and define who you are, and focus on those things, and let the other stuff kind of play out as you would.
Okay, we've talked about recover and just living. Why don't we talk about giving? One of the things that I see mentioned on the outline is giving is the antidote to greed and consumerism.
That's
Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
yeah, I tell you one time for me and why I think it's so important. I was laid off and I was, and could have been a crisis. I thank God I did have an emergency fund, etc. But it was during that time that I realized that a lot of the things that I had possibly taken for granted or didn't really appreciate or were grateful about had an impact in my life. And during that time, and oftentimes when people think about giving, the first thing you think about is money, at least me. But it was giving of my time and serving. And what I quickly realized is that although I was going through a crisis moment in my life, and really didn't know how I was going to come out of it, I know I needed to trust the process and do some of the things that we talked about. I was still able to go out and serve and be around the homeless population, or be around whatever's near and dear to your heart that goes back to the values that mean something to you. I started volunteering at a certified financial credit counseling agency there, and just realizing a lot of people were about to deal with foreclosure, was dealing with way worse situations that I was dealing with. And it really just made me become more appreciative of the things that I were able to experience, and then coming out on the backside to make sure that it was something that I continue to do, which really helped me stay grounded. And so it's a process that goes through my head, like, do I really need this, or this is really a want? And then also it helps you get out of that woe is me part, where, oftentimes it's like misery loves company in a sense. And if you don't allow yourself to get out and do things that really mean something to you, then you could really find yourself in a rut, right? That can lead into like mental crisis, if you will, or mental challenges that you may find yourself dealing with. But then also, just the importance of just to show love and gratitude and thanks to someone else at what level you can do. And what I realized is I didn't have to have $1 million to do that, Scott, that I could do it just with 50 cents, $1, a quarter, a kind smile, for me just to be more conscious about, that situation, which made me forget about some of the trouble and the challenges that I was dealing with personally. Right.
Yeah, no doubt.
It was energy that was transferred. And I know that sounds so crazy in that moment for me personally, on why I think it's important to be able to still, give. And it allows you to find a level of appreciation and gratefulness that for myself didn't know was there.
Yeah, gratitude is the key, and giving is really a part of a grateful living. And if my kids were to stumble in here, and Bryce, you were to ask them, tell their dad to be quiet, and just ask my kids, what are the three things you do with money? I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is what they would say. You save some, you give some, and you spend the rest. And so when Nana sends them a little Christmas card or a birthday card, and it's got $5 stuck inside of it, we take a little bit and put it in a saving jar. We take a little bit and we put it in a giving jar, and then the rest of it's theirs to spend. And I have found that the simple paradigm changes everything, because when you start to give, it's not just about you can say, well, I don't have enough, I lost my job, or I don't have anything, and I don't have anything to give. Well, you don't have to give money. Like Damien said, it can be time, it can be presence, it can be investing in a relationship. We need those now more than ever when we're feeling a lot of social isolation. But giving is really it's an investment. And here's what I mean when I say that. When you invest in a stock, for instance, what you are purchasing is ownership. You're buying a little sliver of a company, A stock is part of that company. So you're owning a little bit of that company. When you give to someone, to a significant other or a neighbor or to an organization, whether it's your time or your presence or your money, whatever it is, you're taking some ownership in that person's life, that person's situation, that organization's mission. That becomes your mission now, and you're sharing in it. And so, I believe this is like breast cancer awareness month or something like that. And so people are giving money for breast cancer awareness. Well, we all know someone that's had breast cancer, and so we want to be a part. We want to take a little bit of ownership of finding the cure for that terrible disease, right? And so I might give money, or I might walk in a walk, or I might do something to raise awareness. And those are the types of things where I believe generous living is crucial. And it's not about trying to go out and look around and find someone that's worse off than you. It's just recognizing that, man, I'm not the only one struggling. There are other people that are also struggling. Some people are having a tough time. I thought I was the only one because I've been locked up for 6 months, and I find out there's a lot of people that are struggling. And maybe together, if we invest in each other, then we find that that we take some ownership of that situation. That's something we can control, right? I can't control a pandemic. People are getting sick. I can't control, how I manage that risk myself. I can't control being a part of a solution, and whether that means, being wise about, how I handle my personal activities, or washing my hands and wearing masks. All those are the little micro things, and those are a part of giving. So if you have money, yeah, absolutely, you want to give money, but it doesn't have to be money. It's about investing in something besides your own misery. And when you do that, I believe what it does is it just, because crises, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a pandemic. It can be whatever. If you just lost your job or a health issue, they can consume you if you allow it. And so you want to be able to just create some space to breathe. And I think that you do that. It's just so counterintuitive, but it just works. I believe you do it by giving, not by hoarding or by buckling down and saying that, just staying within my four walls. It's about getting out and beyond yourself. And here's the thing. It's the same with both giving and saving. I was going to bring this up a little while. I don't want to kind of lose the track here. But when you do that, when you give, what you are essentially doing is you're saying, I can live on less than what I had. Like, let's say we're giving money. If I give $5 to Damien, invest in his work, his mission to help communicate, to communicate financial literacy to the community, I am saying, not only do I believe in what Damien's doing, but I'm also saying I can live on $5 less than what I had. That also means that I had an abundance of resources. I had more than enough. So now I get to share. And this kind of seems, this is just a slight, ever so slight change in outlook that can, I believe, make all the difference. That when you decide to opt out of scarcity and live in abundance, this is what giving does. This is what savings is. Savings is saying, I have more than I need right now. Even though you might not have much, if you put $10 in your account, that's $10 that you didn't need right now, and you were able to pay it forward. You have an abundant resource. And when you start thinking about abundance, then you become grateful. I'm so grateful that I have neighbors that I can invest myself in, or I'm so grateful that I have organizations that are doing work that I couldn't do on my own, and I give to them, and I invest in those relationships and those missions and those organizations. And by doing that, I take ownership of it, and my whole world just expands. I know that I'm almost positive nobody tuned in tonight for that, but I believe 100% that gratitude and gratefulness and a generous lifestyle is fundamental, not only to navigating out of crisis, but also building not just wealth on a balance sheet, but wealth in life. That's a rich living is when you find yourself able to give.
Yeah. And it's important you mentioned that when you talked about that gratefulness, what it did, it did something to my thinking, and I think about, even as we sort of transition a little bit and talk about, think and grow rich, right? And just your mind and what you see and what you believe, which oftentimes control our behaviors at the end of the day. And so just realizing, like, what, I do have an abundance, and being grateful for the $5, because somebody doesn't have the $5.
Right.
And then that $5 become $10. And so, one of the things that I would say is don't despise the small beginnings if you're just now starting to possibly save. Right. And just knowing that in the long haul, when it's all said and done, if I do those things that you said you teaching your children, to set aside a little bit every single time, that when the next crisis comes, you're going to realize that you're not as close to the edge as you thought you were.
That's right.
And you're going to be so appreciative that you can pivot and move and do some things.
That's
and
right.
So for that other person who may be listening, your situation is totally different. And I hear you. Maybe you at a place to where it's I don't even have 2 pennies right now. And what do I do? My mortgage is due. My rent may be due. I got this. I got creditors, etc. One of the things that I'd say, and this is what I wanted to also talk about, there's organizations out there that are in position to be able to help you through those situations at no cost, right? That's not mentioned, that you can give to various missions and things of that nature. Many of us have heard of United Way of Central Alabama. Right. And so for some of us to get out of this crisis, to turn it around to financial security, we have to set aside pride. Right. And so during the housing crisis, when I was counseling one-on-one with individuals, I was working with folks who was pilots, lawyers, all the professions you do think, oh, they probably would never go through any financial situation. Right. But they had to say, you know what, I need help. And so if that's you may want to reach out to United Way of Central Alabama, because they have programs that'll work with individuals to reach out to the creditors, right? To be proactive and intentional, to let them know the hardship that you find yourself in, perhaps. And then the other resource that I wanted to share is many people are struggling to pay mortgages. There's a program in the state of Alabama right now that's called Hardest Hit Alabama, and they will pay your mortgage up to a year, and you don't have to pay the money back, right? So it's nonprofits that come together, federal agencies to come together. You got the private sector that came together because of the high unemployment rate that the state of Alabama has right now, and so there's resources out there. And I think that's why it's important that Bryce is doing this at the Hoover Library to get the word out so people can understand, you know what, you're not by yourself there. And depending on whatever financial situation you may find yourself in, you got the United Way of Central Alabama that can help you. They have access to different groceries. It was important to see people giving food and things of that nature out there. To individuals that were going through different financial situations and hardships. And the list goes on and on. And so I really wanted to make sure we shared that information with the folks, because you have to do something. Yeah. Right. And if we can't bury our head in the sand and not do anything, not open that envelope, not open the mail, because it's not going to just magically go away. Right. So we want to be able to face it. So hopefully you're encouraged on tonight, but what we shared thus far, to face it, to know that you're not by yourself and that you can come out of this doggone thing. But you got to do and implement some of the steps that we talked about on recovering, assessing needs, wants, also living and what that looks like, also being able to give. And I know a lot of people's waited for this last step, Scott, to talk about building.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like?
And just to kind of piggyback on one thing you just said, because I think it's really critical to understand, a part of a generous lifestyle is learning how to receive. You have to be able, it's not about just me giving out, it's me also being open and welcoming and receiving the gifts and resources and the help that are there. There's no nobility in turning down help when you need help. Forget that stuff, man. I'm tired of people acting like they're too good for something. If you need help, there are people and resources and organizations willing to help. And part of living a generous lifestyle is being a good receiver and to say, I need some help. I had someone tell me a long time ago, because I was acting all noble, trying to turn down somebody was just offering a gift. It was an honorarium of something. I can't remember exactly what it was. But I was like, no, I don't need that. And, prideful. It was just so prideful. And I had somebody come pull me aside and chastise me and said, look, what you just did there was so wrong. You deprived that person of the blessing of giving. They were trying to give to you, to help you, and you rejected it. And so I believe in an open, hospitable, welcoming lifestyle. And I believe that part of generosity and part of a grateful lifestyle is being able to accept the help. The library, by the way, it's not about just checking out Hardy Boy books. It's about all kinds of resources. It is a hub of community information. And you can go in there. It is unbelievable. I went in there and Bryce showed me a couple of things. I had no idea you could do that kind of stuff at the library. There are so many resources there. Go in there, talk to someone, say, look, I'm trying to find some resources that can help me, and they will point you in the right direction and let you do your research. So I definitely agree. All right. So if we recognize that, look, this is a tough time, we got to assess where we're at. What are we going to do? How are we going to reorient ourselves in the midst of this pandemic? We're going to recognize that we got to live and control the things that we can control and focus on the things that we control and that matter. And we're going to live a generous lifestyle. What's next? We're going to get a vaccine one day, or maybe, or the virus will go away. We're not going to be in this. There's going to be a tomorrow. How do we build on that? How do we step away from the edge, and then once we get away from the edge, create something better? That's what I think. A lot of these people want that tuned in. We spent 48 minutes talking about all this stuff, but how do we build this? How do we build wealth? Damien, where would you start?
That's a great question. And as you was talking, it's like, building margin, and the first place that I start is again, just from simple saving. You mentioned the 6 and 9 month living expenses, and it's for those needs versus the wants as it relates to the living expenses. But beyond that, some of the stuff, and I often advise people, is you want to do it simultaneously, right? So I want to have money set aside for savings, but I also want to take advantage of whether it's a workplace 401k, or maybe if I need to open up a Roth IRA or individual IRA, what does that look like and what does that mean? And I'm going to pass it back to you, but those are the 2 steps there, Scott. I don't know if you want to go a teeny bit deeper around a 401k and a Roth IRA and what that looks like. And before Scott does it, one of the things that I say, that even though you have those funds and you come across what seems to be an emergency or crisis, try not, I'm not going to tell you not to withdraw funds from those particular accounts because of the tax penalties and the early withdrawal penalty that you oftentimes find yourself in. And so, that's what I'm going to say. there with the 401k to get the company match, right? To me, it's free money. If you're working at a for-profit, or if you're at a nonprofit, you could do the 403b. But you have to start thinking is where can I put my money and invest my money that's going to help me stay ahead of just simple inflation, at the end of the day, because the dollar now is not the same value of the dollar as it was just last year. And so, that's what I would say on a high level on what that individual should start doing there.
Right.
As we talk about that next step.
Yeah. So in my mind, the first things to start, I mean, once we got to get rid of some bad debt. All right. You got to quit living on credit. You got to pay that down. And then you need to get a little bit of money to cover the most essential unplanned things. Life is going to happen. All right. You cannot plan for every eventuality. So you've got to have a little bit of cash set aside to cover those things. Your air conditioner breaks or something. That's the step back from the edge that you got to have. That's cash. That's emergency fund beginning. Now you can build that emergency fund up over time till it gets fully funded. That 3 to 6 months that you always hear, that's the maximum amount. What we don't want is you having, 24 months of cash because now you're losing opportunity. So the difference, so this is key. The difference between saving and investing is risk. That's the most important thing you need to understand. You don't invest for short-term needs, wants, eventualities. You don't invest for the next, whatever crisis that comes around. That's what savings are for. So you put a little bit of money in cash, try to find a place where that cash can work a little bit for you, but understand this, there's no risk in cash. Not going to get any reward in cash. If you can earn anything on cash at all, great, fantastic. But cash is not going to grow. So you need to have it that's your buffer between you and that financial edge. And then you invest for longer term. You invest because investing is letting your money grow. The only way the only proven way, historically proven way to have your money stay ahead of inflation is through investments. And there's all kinds of investments. We don't have the time to go into all of that. We might can touch on some of it. But the main thing is financial planning. Financial planners kind of think in terms of goals. What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And we talk about all this kind of stuff, and I know in a crisis, you just say, I just want to, pay the rent next month, and that's fair enough. But what we are at when we start talking about building, we talked about, surviving this thing, but now we're starting to talk about when we come out of that reorientation, when you reorient yourself to a new habit. Investments will play a part of that. And so what you want to do is you recognize, I'm going to take some managed risk with this money and let that money grow. And I want to just keep doing it. Investment, forget about the headlines and all of this type of stuff. It's not about hitting a home run. This is about getting on base. This is about little base hits. One base at a time. If you happen to stumble across one investment that blew up and did great, fantastic. But that's not how it's going to be. There is risk there, but you have to take that risk in order to get the reward for staying ahead of inflation. And so there's three asset classes, primary asset classes that you need to think about. Let's assume that you've already got your little emergency fund taken care of, right? That's fundamental. That's foundational. You don't need to be investing before you got an emergency fund, because I don't know what's going to happen with that investment if if I had a crisis and the investment was down, I'd have to sell that investment at a loss to fund me getting through it. That's why you don't invest for short term. But let's assume you have that cash, then you have three. So you got three asset classes. You got cash, which is not going to grow, and we know what it is. And cash is king when it's in a crisis, but it's not going to build any wealth long term. You got bonds, fixed income, bonds, all that kind of stuff, and you've got stocks. Stocks are what we talked about earlier. I tell people the difference between stocks and bonds is stocks you own, bonds you loan. That's essentially what's happening. If you buy a stock, you own the company. If you buy a bond, you're lending to whatever it is that you're giving money to, a company or a government or whatever. And so there's kind of cash has no risk. Bonds traditionally have more risk than cash, but not as much as stocks. So stocks would be the riskier of those assets. And so the number one thing you got to do is say, all right, how am I going to spread my money out? If we have an emergency fund, we're not going to worry about cash. How do I divide my assets between stocks and bonds? So if I have $100 to invest, how much of that $100 is going to go to stocks? $50 of fixed income. That would be a 50-50 portfolio, 50% stock, 50% bonds. Or you might say, I want to put 90% in stocks, 10% in bonds, or I might go, 100% in stocks. But that's the big decision that people have to make, and it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But I would say that the longer you have, so when you talk about retirement, if you are a long way from retirement and you're using that 401k or that IRA, you may have 30 years, 40 years before you need that money. Because once you put it in there, you need to think of it that is, I am paying for an expense that I'm going to incur 40 years from now. I'm going to go ahead and put that money in, and you let that grow. The things that I see is people don't have the patience. They want to hit that home run with that stock. And so, and what happens more times than not is you strike out. If you're swinging for the fences, you strike out a lot. If you're swinging for base hits, you just want to keep doing it over and over and over and over, and don't worry about what it's doing right now. I hear, what should I be doing with my retirement? I had someone ask me just the other day, what should I be doing with my retirement in the midst of this pandemic? And I said, well, how long when you plan on retiring? And they laugh. Oh, I'm not planning on retiring anytime soon. I said, well, you don't need to do anything with it. Except put money in it. Keep putting money in it. Keep putting money in your 401k. Keep putting money in your IRA. Whatever it is, just keep doing it. We say around here all the time, little and often fills the pot. Just drop a little in every time. Little and often, little and often, little and often, over and over and over. And don't worry about it. You can't remember what we said. Focus on the things you can control. You cannot control the stock market. Quit worrying about it. Quit watching all the news if it's going to stress you out. Just fund it. Put the money in over and over, little and often, little and often. And eventually you're going to sit down and you're going to look and say, wow, where did that come from? How did that happen? And it happened by you focusing on what you can control, your spending, which then created savings, which then led to investments, and dismissing all those things that matter that you can't control. Quit worrying about it. Laser focus, and then you can start building up some wealth that you will need, and you'll be surprised if you do it. There's I think I can't remember the exact person who said it, but it's always stuck with me, that we tend to underestimate what can happen in 2 years. I mean, we tend to overestimate what can happen in 2 years. We know we get to January 1st and we make all these resolutions. I'm gonna lift weights and I'm gonna lose 50 pounds. All these things, and we think it's just gonna happen, just like that. And by February, we realize we're not going to do any of that, and we give it up. We tend to be overly optimistic as a species about what can happen in the short term, but we grossly underestimate what can happen in the long term. So we overestimate what can happen in 10 years and fail to recognize what can happen in 10 years. And if you can apply that metric, that way of thinking to your investments, don't worry about whether it was, my stock hadn't done anything, my investment hadn't done anything in 2 years. Don't worry about it. You don't need it in 2 years. That's short term. That should be funded with cash if you needed it. What you want is what can happen in 10, 15, 20. And there's this, we can talk, you just go to the library and look up compound interest and find out what compound interest is and what compounding does, and you'll be absolutely amazed. Bryce?
Okay. So I just would like to encourage you, the people watching, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the comment section and we'll get it to Scott or Damien. I just have some general questions. I think we've covered the 4 buckets: recover, live, give, and build, unless you guys want to add anything else to those. I do, and again, this is just general opinions. These are things I get asked from people coming in, and one of the things is about gold, about precious metals. During usually a time of crisis, I get a lot of requests for books on gold or silver. The general, I think, consensus is that is a safe investment when things are sort of going sideways. Would either one of you like to comment on that?
All right, I can try. Damon, I don't know if you have something you want to say. I do have opinions on this, and they're not particularly popular right now. So let me pack up and say, when we buy gold or any precious metal, what are we hoping? What are we hoping happens? It's gold is based on what is often called the greater fool theory. Now, that's not to say that people that own gold are fools, but it's based on this notion that when I buy gold looks like it was, I just pulled up the gold ETF. It was 179.25. I don't know what gold per ounce is, but 179.25 right now. If I bought that share of that ETF, or that's a fund that invests in gold and gold companies, what I'm hoping for is that somebody else, whenever I'm ready to sell that gold, is going to pay more than what I paid. Does that make sense? In other words, it's based on somebody's going to be foolish enough to pay more than I paid. It's the greater fool. Who is the bigger fool? The person that bought it at 179 or the person that bought it at 200? That is called speculation. And I don't want to get too deep into speculation, other than to say that speculation is just kind of hoping. It's just because gold doesn't produce anything. Gold is just gold. It doesn't produce a dividend. It doesn't have any productivity. There's no cash flow in gold. It's just a piece of rock that people think are valuable. And as long as there's some collective belief that has some value, then it has some function, I suppose. It's not, if you say, is it a safe investment? I probably would need to ask what you mean by safe. It is extraordinarily volatile. So it is not a straight line to the moon with gold. I'm going to share my screen real quick if I can. And so this is the gold ETF chart. This is a 1 year chart. And that looks pretty good, right? So if I bought somewhere down here, it's way up here. That looks pretty nice. Now let's look at 3 year. Wow, that looks good. Been nice to been the person that bought it down here and sold it up there. But it's all about perspective, right? So if I keep zooming out and say 5 years, okay, still not too bad, but we had looks like 3 years here where it didn't do anything. 10 years, it's great if you bought in 2015. It's not so great if you bought in 2011. In fact, I just now got back to where I was. I could go all the way back and look at 20-year, 30-year charts, and I'd find out
Oh, I think we lost Scott there for a second.
Lost him. And what I would add to it, I know what Scott was going when he talked about the volatility of the gold there. I see he popped back on the screen.
Yeah, that's one way to stop sharing your screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's not safe if you mean it's not volatile. In fact, you would have had to hold gold until just recently for 20 plus years before you even broke even. In other words, there wasn't a greater fool to pay more for it until just recently. I don't know what gold's going to do going forward. It may be great. I'm just saying that it's not really investment the way financial planners traditionally define investment. Sorry, Damien, I didn't mean to interrupt, and I didn't mean to clock out.
Yeah, I was going to basically say the same thing related to investing, more so with the speculation and the word, is out. When you normally see the economy of the stock market start to go down, then you often hear, to purchase gold to diversify and balance out your portfolio and things of that nature. And I'm on the line of what Scott says. I think there's some other options there that can serve you well over the long term that wouldn't be as speculative.
And I would just also just say, gold's been around a while. You can go to the library and rent some Westerns and find out all kinds of spurious characters that surrounded the gold rush and everybody, all that kind of stuff. There's always seems to be a host of charlatans peddling something around precious metals. I'm not saying that they're all, there are clearly legitimate players in the field, but I would just say buyer beware when you start trading into gold.
Okay, we've talked about stocks and we talked about bonds. Do either you gentlemen want to share any kind of opinion about mutual funds or ETFs?
I would say I love them. That's the first.
Why don't you explain what they are, Damien?
So when you talk about diversifying and being able to, minimize risk related to investing, especially with stocks, if you will, and when you own a share of a company that you have ownership within that company. Well, the cool thing about that mutual fund, and if you're invested in a 401k or IRA or Roth IRA, it's going to be made up of mutual funds, typically where you're going to have various companies that make up that particular fund that's already, constructed, if you will, from the investment company. And so you're able to take a look to see what companies are part of that mutual fund there to understand what you invested in. You're able to also look to see how's that mutual fund performed. I know for me, Scott, I typically look at about a 10-year average rate of return there to see how that mutual fund has performed over that particular time frame, just to get a sense of, okay, depending on where you are and how close you are to retirement, what you can almost project that your money is going to do over that time frame there. And so within the mutual fund family, you have the exchange trade fund, and then you have the index fund. And I'm gonna pass to Scott because I need a bite to eat. But there's a couple differences there with the index fund and the exchange trade fund there, to where one's more of a passive investment and the other one is more active investment there within that particular fund. So you would have either for the index or the exchange trade fund, you have a manager that manages it, which makes it active and or passive, if you will. And so it's a great way to, invest definitely for the long term. It's not as risky for the most part as if you were to invest in the individual company or individual stock. You hear about not putting all your eggs in one basket. Well, that mutual fund allows you to not put all your eggs in one basket. That can be even spread across various industries, perhaps, or it could be within the same industry, right? Say technology industry, but amongst various companies. And so that's what I would say as it relates to a mutual fund. And like I said, if you're doing the IRA or the 401k, the 403b, et cetera, then typically it's going to be in one form of that mutual fund.
Yeah. So mutual funds are basically just a basket of stocks. And so what you buy, instead of being able to have to go and buy, say you wanted to buy the Dow Jones Industrial Average is made up of 30 stocks. Instead of having to go and individually buy each one of those stocks, each one of those companies, I could buy a mutual fund that invested in the Dow Jones. And so the manager has picked all those stocks, and I pay one price and get all of them. Exchange traded funds and mutual funds basically are the same thing. This how they're priced. That's the difference. So mutual funds only price at the end of a trading day. Exchange traded funds are priced intraday. We won't get into all of that, but they're essentially the same thing. It's the same portfolio if it's the same fund manager doing the same stuff. The one caution that I would say, because this is what I see a lot. I see someone and they'll bring a portfolio in and they think that they may have a retirement 401k and they own 5 mutual funds. Okay. Just because you have 5 mutual funds doesn't mean that you're necessarily diversified appropriately. Because if I had 5 mutual funds and they were all specializing in large cap growth, I just have 5 funds with large cap growth. I'm not really spreading the risk out. Diversification is really important when you start getting into really building up an investment portfolio. You want to manage that risk, because what I try to do, we talk about is you just want to kind of own the entire asset class. So I don't know enough about all of these companies to know which one to pick. So I'm not a stock picker. In that I say you need to buy this stock or that stock, because I don't know fundamentally. But if I own all of the stocks, some of those stocks are going to do really well. Some of them aren't going to make it and they're going to go out of business. And so by owning all of them, then you are rising with the market. That's called market risk. I'm getting all of that market risk, and I am eliminating company risk, because if I said I wanted to invest in technology, well, I don't have the ability to know which technology stock is going to be the one that goes to the moon. I can guess, but more time, you think about all the technology stocks, I'm probably going to be wrong. You're probably going to be wrong. Dear viewer, you will be wrong more than you will be right. So you just need to avoid trying to figure out picking that one thing, and just try to own it all. So mutual funds are a vehicle by which you can diversify and own a lot of stocks of a company, or fixed income for that matter. But you need to make sure that just because you own a lot of mutual funds, if they're all the same type of mutual fund, you haven't really diversified. In fact, they probably all own the same thing, And so you're just being redundant and replicating things over and over. So you want to spread it out, but I do think that they're good vehicles for investment, a lot better than trying to build a portfolio of individual stocks. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, last question here. Do you have any suggestions as far as if people want to learn about investing, or as far as like websites that you go to all the time, or newspapers, just general good reputable sources for people that are trying to understand about mutual funds or understand about bonds or building a portfolio? Do you have anything that, like a website that you think is reputable, or a news source? I think there's a lot of noise nowadays, especially with people. I know there's stock tips now is popular. People are paying, people to give them stock tips, but what I'm talking about is just the market, just a good reputable foundational, way to learn about personal finance or investing.
I would say a couple of things. One, you're exactly right, Bryce. There's a lot of noise surrounding investments. Why? Because there's lots and lots of money to be made, and there is no shortage of people trying to separate you from your money. And when you get into investments, just like we were talking about with gold, there are all types of people pushing all types of messages, and they all have their own vested interest. So you need to be very cautious. Anything that appeals to emotion, I would say if you're finding yourself getting emotional by someone's message, whether it's a book or an article, or you're watching the financial media, let that be a red flag to you to slow down, because investing and emotions do not go well together. Everybody can build wealth, but most people will be led by emotion and not by plan. So just be very careful. I don't think that you really benefit from watching the financial media on the television, the cable shows, and all of that stuff. That's really dangerous area for beginners to get in. The other thing I would say is that the financial service industry loves complexity. They want you to believe that things are more complicated and difficult than they really are. You can build a really nice nest egg. You can build wealth without getting into all these things. And frankly, the more complicated, the warier you should be. People don't need to. People try to make themselves sound smart, but the fact of the matter is, you could probably build a portfolio with a total stock index fund, total stock market index fund, a total bond index fund, and you could do a whole lot worse than just figuring out how you're going to divide that, what percentage goes to stocks and what percentage goes to bond. You could do a whole lot worse than just doing that. So be very careful. Obviously, you can go to the library. Not to just keep beating on that, but that's a good place to find various opinions. I do not believe that everybody has to be, the next Warren Buffett. You don't need to aspire for that to do really well. I mean, if they have an interest, then great. Then learn about markets, capital markets, and how they work. Learn from mistakes that people make. Read some books, talk to people, but I would say just be, diversify is key. I mean, you can pick some really crummy mutual fund. As long as you're properly diversified, you can still do okay. You could have done better, but you can still do okay. So don't feel like you have to have it all figured out before you start investing. You just got to get started, and you've got to keep at it. As far as some books, are you asking for like book recommendations or those types of things?
Just whatever
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
feeling.
there's all kinds of great books out there. Um, Burton Maciel has a book called A Random Walk Down Wall Street. That's a good analysis of all the stuff. It's fairly accessible. Charles Ellis has one called Winning the Loser's Game, that is really good. Anything by John Bogle. John Bogle is the guy that started Vanguard, the mutual fund company Vanguard, and he was the pioneer of index investing. Um, I think he has some really great stuff that can help you um, do that. But you probably want to avoid anybody that has pundit or thought leader in their bio lines. I would stay away from anybody that has on their LinkedIn that they're a thought leader or some kind of financial pundit. I would probably stay away from for right now. At least build up a little chop so that you can do your own critical thinking.
Gotcha. Bryce, you gave me a shout out earlier on Our Money Matters. When COVID hit, we were going, 5 days a week down to 3 days. And then I try to do at least one day a week on Wednesdays there to just be a trusted source to share information and education and, personal experiences there. That's really been encouraging to a lot of people. I try to be as practical as I can and invite super friends on that can give some good sound insight. And I often refer to a website that I like. It's called NerdWallet for those individuals that has more of an educational component there. And I like looking at charts to where you could do some comparing related to various brokerage accounts and what the minimum investment is and how much each trade may cost. It breaks down, mutual fund, what's an index fund, exchange trade fund, and things of that nature. And so they give some good sound, non-biased information as far as what I've been able to experience from them. And then the other thing is just, reading money section out of the USA Today or CNN Money, news. I think a lot of people may be on, phones and have various apps just to sort of see what's going on, to read an article and stay in tune. It's something that you want to do on a daily basis. I was thinking, and I got some grades popping up on my chin, from, going to college back in the day and studying, consumer economics for 4 years and then just working, in the business industry for quite a few years and now in the financial services, financial coaching and counseling. But it's something I do on a regular basis. And so that's one of the things that I realize, especially as it relates to financial planning and education, is that it becomes a lifestyle, almost like lifting weights or working out or whatever else, that you just continuously do it over time or whatnot. Now to books, one of my favorite books is a simple read. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. That really gives some good, just sound practical. It's an easy read, but it's so powerful there. That's really, changed my life there. And I try to read that book at least once or twice a year. And I just go back to that same book that keeps me grounded with some of the principles that Scott and I shared today, that would get us to where we ultimately want to be, and not listen to some of the noise and things of that nature. So it's those constant foundational principles that I believe that get us to where we're trying to go. And then I love the idiot books, and financial planning for dummies. I got my library next door, whatnot. You'll see a lot of those books on there, and it just, really breaks it down and quote, layman terms for the most part. And I say this, that what I found in the financial planning piece is it's 80% peer. Earlier when I was talking about just the mind and the thinking, when we talk about giving, it's here. And 20% knowledge or 20%, I got my ratios mixed up, but 80% just mental and 20% more knowledge in the sense of what I need to do so you can create those disciplines that's ultimately going to get you there at the end of the day. And like Scott said, it's those base hits. Anybody that comes talking about home runs and Bitcoin and some of this other, stuff out there, man, I don't even give it the time of day, and I'm more that slow cooker type of person. Just put it in the crock pot and let it do what it's going to do and leave it alone and be educated as you go. So that's what I would share as far as books and websites and such.
Okay, is my mic on? Is it good? Okay. Well, I said I lost the connection. I was just making sure.
Okay.
I really appreciate Scott Cole and Damien J. Carson sharing with us tonight. We're going to put this recording up on the library Facebook page, and we're also going to put their contact information on that post. So if you would like to review it, or if you want to tell some friends to watch it, it's going to be up on there. And so I appreciate everyone attending. Hopefully we can do this, another program similar to this soon. And I will see you guys in the next program. Thanks.
Thanks, Bryce.
Thank you.